Do these physical differences have social repercussions? Throughout history, different aspects of males and females have been considered attractive. As a result, things that differentiate men and women have become much more exaggerated throughout history.
These changes tell us a story about what's going on in the culture. For example, if you compare the Superman of the 1950s to what we now think of as the Man of Steel, you'll see a fairly dramatic difference. If you think about Batman and Adam West as Batman in the 1960s and look at his body and compare it to the Batman of the movies of the 90s, there's a fairly dramatic difference. How about pro wrestling? Pro wrestlers' bodies in the 1960s were more flabby, if you will. If you look at them in the 80s and 90s, they become much bigger and stronger and more rippled. If you look at the Star Wars toy figurines that kids play with in the 1970s and contrast them with the Star Wars toy figurines that are being marketed to kids in the 1990s, you see a dramatic shift. There really is something happening here. Something's going on.
Let's examine how body hair is treated in this culture. It has become a source of masculine pride, probably because of its prevalence on males' bodies over females' bodies. This androgenic hair is an indicator of one's amount of testosterone, and in the eyes of the culture, one's amount of masculinity.
This test shows that Old Spice is the right choice.
Either as a result of this, or a response from other social pressures, females are discouraged from having any body hair at all. It is a female rite of passage to begin shaving legs and armpits and waxing other areas in order to be smooth, the yin to the masculine yang. Many modern women, however, choose not to shave as a way to protest these standards.
Last inch of me's covered with hair.
The polarized trend continues for almost every physical characteristic of each gender. Females being smaller than men, on average, has possibly influenced the pressure for women to be thinner than men. Breasts, hips, and curvy behinds have become valued traits for attractive women. For men, an extremely large and muscled tone has become the ideal. To be manly is to play sports and be covered in hair. Some speculate that this overcompensation of manly attributes may have origins in the women's rights movement. As women began to assert their equality, aka more mental space, men took up more mantle space. It also seems to be more culturally acceptable for men to be bigger, fatter as well, while cultural norm expects women to be thin.
How has clothing been adapted to these trends? Differences in physique led to specialized male and female clothing. Boxers and squarish clothing for men, bras and wider hip clothing for women. However, from being purely functional, clothing now is being marketed to meet the needs of gendering. It is not necessary for people to wear skirts, but as they have been deemed a gendered item that only females wear, it is marketed as such. Clothing is made to accentuate the physical attributes of what we value in each gender, and possibly hide what is not. And while men and women are also marketed the same items, such as pants and shirts, it's obvious which gender they are intended for, based on what we expect men and women to wear. Truly gender-neutral or unisex clothing does exist presently. American Apparel makes many unisex products. They are not marketed in a unisex way, however, and instead are marketed the way any other piece of gendered clothing would be.
How is gender marketable? As stated earlier, advertisements use exaggerations of gender to target certain audiences. They risk losing potential customers if the target is made too specific, so instead they play up and generalize gender so that what people see is attractive, understandable, and relatable. Ads targeted towards men usually either have men watching or playing sports, hanging out with friends, drinking, or being handymen. These kinds of ads aim to relate to men so they have positive feelings about the product. Alternatively, they use images of women being flirty and erotic or chasing after the man. These ads use sexual themes to attract people to the product. Men's advertisements commonly use louder and bolder text and action sequences. There's usually something going on at every moment. Ads targeted towards women show motherly figures cleaning, cooking, doing laundry, applying beauty products, shopping, etc. Again, these ads are meant to relate to women through stereotypic feminine activities. They commonly have calmer tones, relaxed face, and soft text and speech. Another stereotype is that mothers are shown as caring and present, while fathers are shown as insensitive and distant. Though the intentions of these ads are just to relate, to sell the product, they also end up perpetuating stereotypes.
Sometimes, in this attempt to make products relatable, for them to seem personally tailored to the buyer, products are pointlessly gendered. Things like earplugs, sandwich bags, Snuggies, and tape are all marketed to appeal to certain genders. Why? It could be used to make the product pop. For kids' products especially, it is attractive to have a strong visual affinity towards one gender or the other, like how boys often hang "No Girls Allowed" posters on their bedroom/treehouse. This gendering method is a way for the product to be more interesting than the normal non-gendered version. Does this imply that gender is nothing but an ornamentation to an already useful item? Is gender something that we wear in order to accentuate our personality or our humanity?
To what extent does external appearance express an individual's gender identity? External appearance is the most common method of self-expression, especially when expressing one's gender. Gendered clothes follow us from the day we are born. When we examine the clothes that are marketed, there are a lot more options for women than there are for men. Traditionally, women are expected to care more about their appearance, and the fashion industry is heavily reliant on this trait, marketing and selling a much greater volume of clothing to women than to men. Most people across the country are comfortable wearing clothes that match their gender identity and shop at the appropriate side of the store.
However, many people use clothing to become something they're not. The act of cross-dressing has slowly gained presence and acceptance in popular culture. Today, there is a reality TV show called RuPaul's Drag Racing, and a well-known comedian, Eddie Izzard, who identifies as a cross-dresser.
Okay, so I better explain the tits. Didn't have those at school, wanted to, but not in the school curriculum. Even though I asked. Didn't really, but because I would have got my head kicked in. Oh, yes, sir. So the breast thing, as a transvestite, it's my job, right?
One reason that heterosexual men cross-dress is in order to feel as though they are being perceived as having traits of or feeling like the opposite sex. They find that these facets of their personality are harder to express when they are presented in males' clothes. It's difficult to define and defend this desire in society. Transvestites, on the other hand, are people who cross-dress in a fetishistic sense. Eddie Izzard has been quoted as saying several things in defense of his choice to cross-dress. He professes that clothes are not part of his performance, nor a sexual fetish. Quote, "If you can walk down the street in women's clothes, you can do anything." Unquote. He describes himself as a straight transvestite, or a male lesbian, and a complete boy plus a half a girl, and a male tomboy.
What about clothing variants in women? Tomboyism is another facet of cross-dressing. A tomboy is a girl who from an early age does not identify with girly girl clothes, toys, and games, and instead dresses and plays in a more traditionally boyish manner. In her book, She's Not the Man I Married, Helen Boyd, a tomboy herself, states that the assumption in much research about tomboys is that they either grow up to be lesbians or, if they are heterosexual, tomboyism is only a phase. None of the research seems to credit heterosexual tomboys with having to give up being visibly tomboy because they otherwise won't or can't date. I'm tired of having my own struggles fitting in as a masculine woman, dismissed because I'm heterosexual. Women have come a long way on the tomboy front, however. A woman wearing a non-skin tight clothes and pants does not cause as much of a stir as a man wearing sequins. Why is this? Throughout history, women have dressed as men in order to gain power. This is because most societies from stage 3 onward are patriarchal, valuing masculine traits. It is much more acceptable, therefore, to want to be masculine than feminine.
How do the perceptions of appearance and gender differ between drag kings and queens versus transvestites? Both drag royalty and cross-dressers use clothing to define their gender identity. They also use media stereotypes that help them know how to dress and act in order to be perceived as the opposite gender. The difference between drag royalty and cross-dressers is that dressing in drag is used as part of a performance, to play a role or character. Stereotypes are pushed to the extreme as a way to become a kind of spectacle. Cross-dressers, however, do not wish to bring attention to the fact that they are cross-dressing, and they want to continue being themselves. But people who cross-dress are still performing as the opposite gender, but to a different kind of audience.